I'm ready. Yeah.
Okay.
Do we proceed or wait a little
Yeah,
more?
I'd just like to welcome everybody to our March Lunch and Learn. Today we've got Justin Campbell from National Field Service as our guest speaker today. His topic will be integration of hydrogen into the American and global energy mix. Um, a couple things before we get started real quick. I just want to let everybody know that our Chapter 88 was voted on by the board of directors, and we got a lot of good feedback, and they'll be voting on us becoming a chapter in June at the International Education Conference in San Antonio. So that's the update with that. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Justin and let him go ahead and present his presentation. If you're not talking, please mute your microphone, and if you have questions, you can either, Justin, would you prefer people to ask questions during your presentation or after?
Maybe after would be more convenient.
Okay,
And some of their questions might get answered as we go along.
sure. And then we'll keep an eye on the chat as well. So at this time, Justin, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, Johnny. So I'm Justin Campbell. Put together this presentation today about hydrogen, just seeing the trends that were going on in energy news. So I get news feeds constantly and kind of geek out over hydrogen. When I was younger, I used to be really into ocean thermal energy conversion. That's what first got me into it, and the idea of taking the difference between a hot liquid on the top of the ocean and a colder liquid down below and making energy out of that gradient. And then other kinds of energy come along. I got into gas and oil. I was working in Ohio for a bit doing that. That's when I was with Fenstermaker, great company. Then went on to work in New York State when that winded down because of oil prices. They did a lot of solar up there, and I'm not political, so I don't care if it's solar, wind, gas, oil. If it makes money and helps us all out, I'm happy. Came back down to Pittsburgh area, to the area of Appalachia, to join Kerry Cimaroli and Steve Carr at NFS. That's this last year, National Field Services. So I'm happy to be with them and moving forward, getting some good projects rolling in. And hopefully someday we'll see hydrogen coming through because it seems like a lot of companies are jumping on with it. So I'm a professional wetland scientist. I've been doing permitting and ecological field services, compliance for 15 years at least. So I grew up on a dairy farm in central New York, just up by Lake Ontario. Not the New York people think of when they think of New York, but it's a big state with a lot of country. So great people up there, but not a whole lot going on. So now I'm down in Pittsburgh. Our parent company is Dudley Land, so we kind of mix the land with the field science, identify constraints so we can avoid expensive reroutes kind of in the beginning. That's the idea, and we're rolling along with that. And we'll do gas, oil, getting into some solar stuff more recently. So talking about hydrogen today. So hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. It comprises about 75% of the baryonic mass, so the certain particles you can see, 75% of that's hydrogen. On Earth, hydrogen occurs very rarely as hydrogen gas, only 0.00005%, so minuscule amount. Mostly it's bound up with other organic compounds, so like petroleum compounds. CH4, that's methane gas, it's a very common one. Hydrogen is a part of that by combining with a carbon atom. So it readily combines with organic matter, not so much with metals. It actually causes a problem with metals, embrittlement of metals. That's kind of a problem we'll discuss in a little bit. So it's very common, not in the form we'd like it to be, so we're figuring out how to get it into the H2 form, keep it stable, and use that as an energy source for electric production and fuel transmission. All right, so some history of it, going back, a lot of the development hydrogen we know about is in Europe. Don't know if other parts of the world had much going on, but in Europe, 1520 was the first time that there was the first record of hydrogen from Paracelsus. Am I pronouncing that right? Swiss physician, alchemist. And then it goes on with more advancements in the study of hydrogen mostly all in Europe there. Hydrogen given its name in 1783. Hydro equals water, genes born of water. Electrolysis of water into hydrogen in 1789 by a Dutch physician, and then the concept of a fuel cell, we're getting interested, 1801. One big advancement with hydrogen was actually the ability to do basically a Haber-Bosch process where you can create fertilizer from hydrogen and nitrogen in the air, and they're doing that a lot in the U.S. Hydrocracking. That was a German scientist. We go along further in the USA, land of innovation, Ohio State University. Liquid hydrogen was tested as rocket fuel, and it's gone on to be used in the space propulsion for the spaceships. General Motors gets its own electro van, first fuel cell in 1966, and it goes on from there. They're getting into solar-powered hydrogen, a lot of that in Germany now, 1990. So a lot of great advancements coming along. Hopefully we get more of those in the USA, and we are. So looking at the technology side, you have hydrogen, the element that can be used as gas and can be used to create electricity. So this is a nice little figure I have that shows all the ways you can use hydrogen for fuels, propelling vehicles, including ships. And it's actually better as far as energy use to propel your bigger vehicles than refueling little ones, but advances are being made all the time. There are different types of hydrogen, different colors. People kind of categorize them to describe them. You've got basically based on the source of hydrogen, the methods used to produce it, and then the byproducts of producing hydrogen. So there's gray, blue, and green. Gray describes basically hydrogen being created from fossil fuels with the carbon dioxide byproduct being released to the atmosphere. You can also create it from biofuels and release carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. So it's not just petrochemical. Now blue is hydrogen created from carbon source, petrochemical, could be biofuel. Most often, 99% of the time in the U.S., it's going to be from petrochemicals right now through the steam reformation process or method, SRM. When that CO2 is released, it's gray. When the CO2 is captured for storage or reuse somewhere else, and there is even talk about turning that CO2 into graphite, because graphene is a great material. They're coming up with new ways of using it. Well, then that would be considered blue. You're no longer releasing the CO2 to the air, the atmosphere, you're storing it or reusing it. And green is CO2, well, there's no CO2 byproduct. Green hydrogen is created from water using electrolysis generally, although there are other methods for splitting that hydrogen away from water. The byproduct would be oxygen, no carbon dioxide produced. So gray would be carbon to the atmosphere, generally from petrochemicals. Blue, carbon stored, not released to the atmosphere or used, generally derived from petrochemicals. And then green is that 1% or less where hydrogen is coming from, solar, it's coming from electrolysis of water using wind power or something. And there are other methods. So like I said, steam methane reforming is the heat plus petrochemicals used to get the hydrogen, extract the hydrogen from that CH4 molecule. Electrolysis, that 1%, I already explained that. There's also other ways of extracting hydrogen or creating hydrogen, photochemical, like from photovoltaic cells using catalysts, and then photobiological, getting your algae and bacteria to create hydrogen using sunlight under certain conditions, and it's very much in the early stages of research. Now, we do have currently a lot of talk about integrating hydrogen into natural gas lines, so that we can already, and it's already started in some countries here. It's set to go up running, I think, this fall with the Long Ridge Energy Plant in southeast Ohio, Hannibal, Ohio. Hydrogen, like I said, does cause a problem of metal embrittlement, so steel embrittlement. but not much, not at low level. So you wouldn't run 100% hydrogen through an existing pipeline, a steel pipeline. You'd want something like a plastic, a polymer pipeline. So even then, if we did, let's say, go all hydrogen someday, we'd still need plastic feedstocks. Fossil fuels would definitely still be a necessary part of our economy. And when you're looking at transmitting it through the existing natural gas supply chain, you'd go up to 5. They're going to start at Long Ridge doing 5% hydrogen and natural gas as a blend. You could go up to about 10%, and then you've got concerns about steel embrittlement. So we're looking at gathering lines, transmission lines, distribution lines. Those are the three sets of pipeline networks that all come together to extract natural gas and run it through to an end user. And each of these has its concerns with hydrogen. Right now, looking at production of hydrogen in the U.S. as well as other energy sources, this graphic here shows a map of the U.S. and the blue dots, the dark blue, would be your hydrogen. A lot of that centered along the coastlines, especially down there on the Gulf Coast, where hydrogen is currently used as part of the petroleum refining process. There's about 1,600 miles of pipeline meant just to carry hydrogen for refining. It's also used for fertilizers and other manufacturing processes, but the bulk of it's used in refining right now. And here's a map that shows our existing, I think that was about 2018, this map is from, shows the existing natural gas lines in the U.S., interstate, intrastate. There's about 2 million miles of natural gas distribution mains, 321,000 miles of gas transmission gathering, 175,000 miles of hazardous liquid pipelines. And we can basically, we'll need to retrofit a lot of these if we ever wanted to go above 10% hydrogen in a blend. And keep that in mind because that does create a lot of opportunities for people, maybe perhaps employment. Some concerns about using hydrogen in our existing infrastructure. One is that steel embrittlement. Another one is the cost. If you want to go hydrogen, you'll have to probably maintain or upgrade, change out your pipelines so that they're more compatible with hydrogen. Hydrogen, it's a tiny little molecule. CH4, your methane, is a larger molecule. Hydrogen's teeny. It can actually leak out through pipelines. Not en masse, but just enough. You'll have some transmission loss, more so than with the methane. Even with the plastic, you'll have a little transmission loss, just less than with steel. So the steel embrittlement is one problem. Replacement and maintenance on pipelines is another. And then new safety regulations. When you're taking a chemical or a compound that's more volatile and you're sending it really close to a populated area, there are some safety concerns. Plus, if you're getting people in there to work in confined spaces along these pipelines, and you have a very teeny molecule of hydrogen leaking out from the pipeline, leaking out through seals that have to be upgraded, maybe compressor stations, going into confined workspaces that can displace oxygen. So a worker who'd enter in there could suffocate. And then you have to worry about creating a spark near an environment where you have hydrogen and oxygen. That could be bad. Transmission loss. End users, we need to develop a market. We have a lot of people, a lot of companies wanting to use hydrogen to create green products like steel and concrete, not to mention the refining market, using that hydrogen as a compound in refinement of petrochemicals. It's getting it to them and then also making sure that their equipment is compatible with running on hydrogen. For the refining, they know what they're doing. For someone like manufacturing, they would have to get new appliances, make sure they're compatible. Your standard household appliance, I think that I saw the number of a maximum 28% hydrogen before it could no longer function. So that would be replacing a lot of stoves and furnaces. So the talk is, well, we're looking at incorporating more hydrogen into our economy to use a blend right now. And that blend is about 10% hydrogen in the national natural gas grid. If you went 100%, you would have to replace a lot of these gas lines or install new ones. So when we're looking at the existing infrastructure out there, a lot of it's steel, and the gathering and transmission lines, majority of the pipeline components are steel. Only a little bit is plastic. You can see about 10% of the gathering lines and hardly any in transmission lines. Your distribution system is separate from your transmission. That's where you're going to go to your end users, like a commercial area or in a city to use for heating. Those distribution services have a higher component of plastic in them, plastic pipelines, I mean, the total system. So right there, they're better able to handle hydrogen. But studies are still being done, and the US NREL, National Renewable Energy Laboratory, is funding those. They got a lot of money this last summer, July 2020, to put into collaborative research. So when it comes down to it, about half the pipelines out there are plastic, half about steel. So we can work with that and start introducing hydrogen, and that's the plan. Some other end users are in manufacturing. So let's just say if we're talking high carbon footprint industries like steel and concrete, they use a lot of energy, and there's talk about getting hydrogen, fueling them with hydrogen, and there are actually some steel concrete manufacturing plants that are running on 100% hydrogen. They'll just have a higher cost. Transportation, your larger vehicles, it's more efficient for hydrogen to operate a larger vehicle, like a ship, like a passenger train, not so much with your smaller vehicles. The ones that have a greater distance between refueling points and can carry the weight of hydrogen needed to get them there. Specialized equipment like forklifts, and I don't know if any of you know, but Plug Power is located now in Canonsburg, so a neighbor of ours, a few that are in that region, and they can build forklifts, and you can use them, in an enclosed environment. You don't have to worry so much about emissions and air pollution for workers in small spaces using those forklifts. So they're making some good progress getting those out in the market. Petrochemical refining, power generation, you got the Long Ridge plant with GE turbines that are meant to run on hydrogen or natural gas. So General Electric is really putting money into that advancement. Residential, it's not being used, but it could be used. Current appliances can only handle 28% of a hydrogen blended with natural gas maximum. That's why we're thinking about a 10% hydrogen introduction into the system. Otherwise, you go beyond that, you have to replace everyone's furnace and if you have a gas oven. And then agriculture, we had a big population boom thanks to fertilizer production. That's in that Haber-Bosch process invented by the German scientist. And we've seen examples of that actually in the Midwest, where they've got local fertilizer plant that produces nitrogen from the air, from ammonia and hydrogen, and the electrolysis splits the water into hydrogen that's combined with ammonia from the air and produces fertilizer out in the Midwest. Pretty neat stuff. So like our concerns would be leaks, safety, appliance upgrades anyway when you're talking about distribution into these systems and to the end users. We have some incentives coming out related to the production and technologies here in the U.S., a whole pile of them. There's a lot of text. So the government has come out with incentives for low emissions vehicles, tax credits to help people embrace more of these alternative energies and alternative technologies. So there's a whole list of them, and they're on the books right now in the U.S. Code. Fuel tax credits, improved technology loans, and so there's support for it. There's also policies of developing a national alternative fuels corridor with hydrogen fueling stations along well-used highways, thinking that trucks could benefit from this, the shipping. And we've probably heard of ESG, the environmental, social, corporate governance. It's basically like, I think of it like morals for corporations. And they're really getting on board with it. That's great. They promote sustainability, social justice. And you've got companies like Shell, BP, Total, Dominion. They're exploring the use of hydrogen and their future plans. U.S. has its own hydrogen strategy going on right now. So although we only have about 1% of hydrogen produced via electrolysis, 99% from petrochemical, there's a lot of funding that was introduced this last summer under the last administration, $64 million to form a collaborative research efforts to develop new technologies, get new efficient electrolyzers, catalysts for splitting the hydrogen. And so they're making a lot of that. And we're hearing also how there are some companies out there, like Southern Gas is pushing big into this high blend collaborative team. So other countries around the world are making strides, like Germany, mostly landlocked, doesn't have a whole lot of natural gas reserves itself. They're pushing for a hydrogen strategy, and they're partnering with offshore wind in the North Sea to produce hydrogen, have it pumped in through their natural grid, natural gas grid. Scotland also, they have an excess of wind power, and they're researching ways of getting hydrogen created more efficiently. Australia, which was heavily coal dependent and shipped a lot of that to Asia, now that they're seeing like Japan wanting to go green and completely fossil fuel or coal free, they're pushing to use their resources. A lot of bare land that's non-used, they're going to put that into solar. They already have, and they've got their own national hydrogen strategy to ship that liquid hydrogen off to Japan and other Asian countries. So they're really jumping on it, and they put a lot of money into it. They see a lot of potential from it, so there are a lot of companies investing in them, like in Europe. China is also pushing for hydrogen itself. So some regional businesses we have right in our own backyard. The Plug Power is one. It's a company based up in Albany, New York. They purchased the local company in Canonsburg, and they're growing their operations out there, researching ways of promoting more technologies like their existing forklifts, and then other advancements. So I think our region can stand to benefit from it. And then the Long Ridge Power Plant in Southeast Ohio as well, with their plans to start pumping by this fall. About 5% of the total volume would be 5% hydrogen in the natural gas lines. And they're open to having, I mean, it's an area with a lot of potential to have solar and wind contribute some of that green energy into it. It's still a small amount. We're going to be definitely heavily reliant on fossil fuels to energize our country, for sure. In the production, some of the things, some of the trends I'm seeing, you can pull apart those little hydrogen atoms a lot better if you have a good catalyst, and that helps to push the chemical reaction along. So we're making strides into like developing new catalysts and technologies to separate hydrogen using electrolysis more efficiently. And we can use all that great fossil fuel to make the pipelines it's going to take to redo our whole network if that's the direction we go in, because that's going to be a lot of plastic. Graphene production is something else. They're using graphene as a way to help with the electrolysis or the separation of hydrogen. And byproducts. What do you do? Let's say we're using 99% of our hydrogen is created from fossil fuels. What do we do with that carbon byproduct? And there are companies doing a lot of good R&D that are looking into turning that carbon into graphene. Graphite is it's a mineral, natural mineral. Graphene, it's one thin sheet of graphite, and it's got amazing properties in manufacturing and technology. So those are being researched right now. And the goal is to get the cost of hydrogen down under $2 per kilogram in the next 4 years, which they feel is realistic because it's already come down a lot. Like solar, many advancements have been made in solar. They've gotten the cost per watt down very affordably. They're expecting that with hydrogen. So opportunities for us, well, I know a lot of us in this group are landmen. I do permitting myself. There are great opportunities if we do have to. I mean, just look at this map showing all the pipelines out there. And potentially you'll have some hydrogen being transported as a liquid form, but that's very expensive. You've got to freeze it and maintain a cold temperature and high pressure. So one of the things the NREL, National Renewable Energy Laboratory, is doing is looking into coming up with carbon fiber storage, so that would be very strong storage container able to hold the hydrogen at that temperature and high pressure. but more realistically, we'll probably be transporting it through fuel lines initially, as a smaller component, as a blend. So we're going to have to do some retrofitting of these pipelines, and just look at that map. It's covered 2 million miles of pipeline, friends. There's some opportunity out there. And that's why I wanted to talk to you today about this topic, just so you're aware of this trend and that major energy companies across the world, definitely here in the US, are looking at embracing hydrogen. Keep in mind that if there is the current hydrogen only pipelines, there are basically near refineries. A lot of those are going to be down your Texas Gulf Coast. That's only 1,600 miles total, and we've got 2 million miles of other pipelines. That's a lot of potential for work for us to get into. That was a lot of info, so if you guys have any questions, I may not be able to answer them. I'm not an expert on hydrogen. I've just been learning a lot and wanted to share it with you guys and bring you up to speed. There are new advancements being made all the time. So hope I didn't blow through that too fast, Johnny.
No, I think there's a lot of good information, and as the world's changing, we've got to be able to keep our eyes on what's going to be next for everybody in their careers, as far as no matter what industry you're in. I did have a question. The efficiency of running it through pipeline, which would be I think a lot of people's preference over. Can you transport this via rail or tanker?
You can. It can be done, but it's expensive because you've got to get it down such a low temperature, like way below freezing. I forget the exact number, and a high pressure to get it into that liquid form, because it wants to exist as a gas, and it doesn't exist all that stably as a gas. It'll want to combine with other organic compounds. So it can be done. It's used for specialty products, so manufacturing processes that need it. It can be transmitted by rail, by truck in a similar tanker, or on a ship. It's just not commonly done because there's a market for hydrogen, but not an enormous one to justify the cost. So it's preferable to send it through the pipelines. It's just a lot more feasible. You wouldn't have to cool it, and you wouldn't have to put it under a high pressure. And it would be contained in that pipeline, so it wouldn't interact with oxygen and combust.
Does anybody else have any particular questions they'd like to ask Justin at this time? You can either put it in the chat, or you can actually turn on your microphone and ask the question, because I think a lot of the Zoom calls and the other webinars that you see, there's not a lot of interaction, and so feel free to speak up if you have a question.
Yeah, I have a question. Justin, good to see you. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
okay.
I can.
Okay, good. So what you may have mentioned this, but I might have missed it, is what's the benefit of adding up to 10% hydrogen into the natural gas?
Right now, it's more like a green initiative, as far as I see it. It's getting another fuel source. It's not purely from fossil fuels and can be derived from other sources like excess wind or solar. If there is a lot of that excess power generated, and if it can't be stored in, like, say, a battery storage bank for re-release to the grid, we can use that excess capacity to produce hydrogen and then pump it into our system. It can be stored as natural gas in a pipeline that's flowing through the U.S. It could be stored in reservoirs, and they're looking at using spent natural gas caverns or formations, and then salt mines to hold hydrogen like a big battery. So you can hold it and store it for use later. It takes a lot of energy to produce it, potentially more energy to produce hydrogen than just taking that used wind energy and redirecting it to another part of the country or storing it in a battery. But with the advancements being made, it's less and less of a waste. It's becoming more feasible. So we have the government stepping in, wanting to promote more of the research and development, pushing for more efficiency. So right now, it's not the most efficient, but it can be used just like natural gas in a lot of your appliances, up to, depending on the appliance, 28%, but for safety reasons, 10. So it's getting more diversity in our energy sources. as far as I can see so far.
Okay, and just to clarify, and this was just from what I understand, and again, if I missed something, my fault. It can be made either primarily from separating or turning methane into hydrogen, or taking water and pulling out the hydrogen. And I guess that would be using the renewables, solar, wind, to pull the hydrogen out of the water, thus, and then using that, correct?
Yeah, correct. The two main methods right now, steam methane reformation, and that's done with petroleum largely for refining, and then other manufacturing products that require hydrogen, or electrolysis, taking water and splitting the hydrogen off of it. That's correct.
Okay, interesting.
So the advantages on the renewable side is when you have more energy than you have demand is for the storage.
Yeah, it's a way to store that excess energy and then use it later, basically. And there are some areas, and it's not a common problem right now in the U.S. because we don't have that much offshore wind, but the coastal states are making big pushes to get more offshore wind. And I mean, I couldn't imagine there being an excess capacity at this point, but eventually there's enough resource out there, enough space for these turbines offshore. There could be. And so there are countries, like when you looked at the UK, their offshore production in Scotland is so high, people were being paid to use the electric, and they realized there's got to be something else they can do with all the excess capacity. So they were running electrolyzers producing hydrogen they could ship off to other places. These are their islands, so they're not plugged into a natural gas pipeline. But those are technologies they're making advancements now. We could use them here in the U.S. and other places to get the cost down.
So really, from your presentation, it looks like the biggest chokehold is when you're going from the pipeline back into either the commercial use or end user use, as far as the most dangerous part. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. And there are a lot of studies that need to be done about safety, what's permissible right now, how close can you get to, let's say, a school or population center once you go into that distribution system. It was meant for natural gas, not for hydrogen. So they have to look at like the ability of the distribution infrastructure to handle hydrogen safely. And then where is it going? There are ways you can extract hydrogen at certain points, and they're studying that. Potentially you could send maybe a 50-50 blend of hydrogen and gas, and then along the way have a vehicle refueling station extract that from the gas line. Don't know the exact technology of doing that, but that's being researched. And the gas, basically, it would continue transmitting the remaining amount with just less hydrogen. So just a lot of R&D needs to be done. Can't hear you.
Johnny, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Got a question. How much natural gas hydrogen mixture could current pipelines hold without being updated before embrittlement occurs?
I don't know the exact number, but they're putting it at 10% right now for that margin of safety. And I believe you can find that if you look up hydrogen, NREL, it's your National Renewable Energy Laboratory. It's federal under the Department of Energy. There are studies that are going on citing that 10% is a healthy maximum right now that everyone can agree on before you have to worry about steel embrittlement. So you could probably go a little higher, but 10% is the safety benchmark.
Do we have any other questions for Justin? Take that as a no. Well, we appreciate your time today, Justin, and this is an interesting topic as we're moving forward. All energy is on the table, and how we can integrate it into our current system. Well, they just left whatever I was saying. So once again, we'd like to thank you. Next month, we're going to have Mark Sr. and Mark Jr. Schmauscher talk about appraisal. And we are looking forward to trying to secure our May speaker. If we have anybody that wants to speak on a particular topic, please reach out to us. Part of our registration form is to ask you guys as a group, what subjects that we should bring to be able to present to you guys, as is a group that is open for everybody. Our June luncheon, it will be our first scheduled in-person face-to-face event until since COVID started. That will be actually the third Tuesday of June, and that'll be a joint meeting with NEPA. And we're going to have that, right now it's scheduled to be held at the AC Hotel in South Point. I'd like to thank Steve Carr and everybody from NEPA for joining in and helping us put this together. So we'll have some more information for that. We will send out a sign-in sheet to everybody that attended the event. We had a couple people get online late because of a technical issue with Blue Jeans, and we resent them the link, so we probably missed some people that couldn't get on today. We'll get the YouTube video up here most likely this evening, and we'll get that list out to you. I think everybody was in good, except for two people asked us to only share their emails. If you don't want all your information shared, please drop me an email after this. We had several gyms sign up, and I couldn't determine, I think I got two of them, but there might be a third gym that I did not capture. So if all the gyms could email me and let me know they made it on, that would be great as well. And if you guys have any questions in the future, please let us know. And thank you for your time, and you guys have a wonderful day and stay safe.